actions are no reflection on the very many police officers who uphold the high standards that you upheld.
Despite your efforts at the time to appear emotional and sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer.
Cops often abuse their power without a second thought, and it only takes one moment for everything to go wrong. Watch as these officers get put in their place by judges who refuse to let them escape the law. Idaho police officer Daniel Howard was arrested in connection with the death of his wife, Kenny Howard, a death he initially claimed was a suicide. However, Kenny's daughter later alleged that Daniel had murdered her and then tried to cover up the crime scene to make it look like a suicide.
Show that Kenny died of asphyxiation. That's the result of carotid restraint. Something Dan knew how to do. Evidence will show that she was shot in her mouth, but that happened after she was already dead. This explains the lack of the blood at the crime scene. When somebody's dead, their heart slows down and then stops beating. When the heart is slowing down, it's to look like a suicide. 3 questions. Who? Who had the opportunity? Well, Dan was the only other one in the house. Evidence will show you that. How? Who had the ability to stage a crime scene? Dan had the law enforcement training and experience needed to hide or leave little evidence at the scene. Why? What's the motive? Kendi was going to take half of everything in the divorce. $1 million.
It was shocking how Howard had used his years of police training to perfectly execute the murder of his wife and leave no traces.
We have to look at the timing of the departure. This wasn't a departure pre-trial. This was a departure, and Mr. Howard chose the timing of the departure after the state rested its case in chief. And the timing of that is significant because that was after Mr. Howard had a chance to assess the strength of the case against him. Some very compelling evidence is before the jury demonstrating that he is guilty of murder.
Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Howard had pleaded not guilty, hoping he would get a free pass. But after hearing all the testimonies, the jury finally reached its verdict.
1. Is the defendant Daniel C. Howard guilty or not guilty of domestic battery? Guilty. Count 2. Is the defendant Daniel C. Howard guilty or not guilty of murder in the first degree? Not guilty. Is the defendant Daniel Howard guilty or not guilty of second degree murder? Guilty.
Counsel, I'm proposing a sentencing date of May 23rd at 1:30 p.m. That's available. I will order a PSI or a pre-sentence investigation. Mr. Howard, I'll have you talk with your attorney about that. You have the right to participate or not participate in that. You continue to have the right to remain silent. Is remanded into custody. I'll see everyone back May 23rd at 1:30 for sentencing. We will be in recess.
The jury unanimously decided that Howard was guilty of second-degree murder. It's shocking to think that the murder happened in 2021, and the bizarre individual had roamed free without any consciousness for over 3 years.
I struggle with guilt, and I struggle with not knowing. I wish I could have convinced her to stay with me instead of going home that night. The fear on her face and in her voice when she told me about how she woke up with him standing over her will never leave me. Nothing will fill the hole he has created. Nothing can fix or undo what he has done. But her name can be free. The thought that he can no longer have control over her name, her memory, and her spirit gives me a sense of peace.
Not that monster, I assure you, that people portrayed.
It was unsettling how Howard remained completely emotionless throughout the trial, not shedding a single tear, even after being found guilty.
No, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that you strangled your wife, you murdered her, and then you staged her naked body in the bathtub, shot her through the mouth, and tried to pass this off as a suicide. That's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And, often in horrible crimes like this, everybody wants to know why. And often we don't know why. And I can't get inside your brain, but the pretty clear evidence, I agree with the state, is that this was due to, jealousy, greed, pride, anger, revenge, some combination of that.
Before announcing the sentence, the judge addressed the remorseless killer with a statement that made his disgust for Howard and his actions unmistakably clear.
When you killed Kendi, you didn't just kill your wife. You killed a mother, you killed a grandmother, you killed a sister, you killed a daughter, you killed a coworker, you killed somebody who brought a lot of life and light to those around her and those she touched. And you snuffed that out because of your own pride, greed, and anger. Despite your efforts at the time to appear emotional and sad and distraught, it's clear to me that you're a remorseless killer. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say that lightly at all because we don't like to think that anybody would be like that. The lack of remorse, the lack of caring, and just the callous disregard that you had for Kendi and how her death affected those around her. The same thoughts. You were talking about allowing people to live through your own self-control and restraint, understanding why people would kill their, quote, old ladies and go to prison. And so you're 58 years old. I don't see a lot of rehabilitation, sadly, in your future. Maybe, perhaps, but that's not a significant mitigating factor in sentencing you.
The officer believed his badge would shield him from the consequences of his horrific crime, but in the end, justice was served.
There is a severe punishment for murdering your wife, and there's no sort of mitigation because the marriage is on the rocks or the wife was unfaithful or things like that. There's absolutely no justification here for murdering your wife, and I think it's important that the sentence sends that message as well. Beyond a reasonable doubt is that you strangled or asphyxiated your wife. You murdered her. You staged her body to be found as if it were suicide. It's an outrageously egregious murder. And of course, all murder is, but this is particularly heinous in my view, having sat through the trial and seen all the evidence.
Finally, after completing the speech, the judge handed down the perfect sentence, which ensures that he'll be spending the rest of his life in prison.
Of the offense standing alone is sufficient to justify a fixed life sentence, and that is what I'm going to impose here. I think Kendi's family deserves to have that closure. The crime is so egregious that I don't think...
While this was incredibly shocking, watch how the next Wales police officer made a shocking blunder.
Actions are no reflection on the very many police officers who uphold the high standards that you upheld. That means that your total sentence is one of 6 years and 4 months.
A Wales police officer, Ben Cook, is on trial after he misused his position and tried to steal data from state computers to steal £60,000 from a deceased individual.
Police officer with South Wales Police for over 10 years and had been promoted to the rank of sergeant. On the 28th of December 2023, you and other officers attended a sudden death at a property in Pencoed. £16,870 was seized from a safe in the property for safekeeping. It was being saved by the deceased for his funeral. It was counted, and that count was recorded on body-worn video. Outside the property, you spoke to Miss Price, who was the deceased's sister. She was not allowed to enter the property and was not aware that the cash had been seized. 2 days later, her nephews told her that the money was missing, and so she reported it to the police, who told her that they had seized the money.
Sergeant Cook had planned the robbery of the £16,000 in such a way that you'd be shocked. The corrupt individual didn't even care about the deceased.
Was tasked to return the money was away. You went to Miss Price's home to return the money to her. You counted it in front of her, and she signed to acknowledge receipt of the cash. She told you that she was going to put it in her safe. You asked to use her toilet, which was situated next to the front door, and then stole the key to the front door, which had been left in the lock. Later the same day, Miss Price realised that the key was missing, and she replaced it with her spare key. Your personal vehicle was seen in the same street later that evening. On the afternoon of the 8th of January, using a mobile phone that you had obtained for the purpose, you telephoned Miss Price pretending to be someone named Thomas from the coroner's office. You told Miss Price that she had to attend the Prince of Wales Hospital in Bridgend urgently, as there was an issue with her brother's post-mortem examination. At the hospital, Miss Price discovered that no one named Thomas worked there, and that none of the staff had contacted her.
Cook, who had been in the department for 10 years, was acting more like a robber from a crime film. What he did next will leave you shocked and agitated.
Having ensured by that means that Miss Price would be out of the way, you went to her address that afternoon, wearing black clothing and carrying a black Under Armour rucksack. You would not have been able to gain entry using the key that you had stolen, because the spare key was still in the back of the lock. When officers searched your home address on the 15th of February this year, they recovered a black Under Armour rucksack from your bedroom wardrobe and found Miss Price's missing front door key in the side pocket of that rucksack.
Despite his bizarre fake call to Miss Price, he was unable to get his hands on the locker. However, he didn't stop here and made another attempt a few days later.
February 2024, you carried out searches on police computer systems into an address in Maesteg and the family that lived there. You did so because you had seen intelligence that suggested that £60,000 in cash was present at that address. At about 11:45 hours the following day, the 7th of February 2024, you went to that address. One of the occupiers, Miss Watkins, was at home and was in the shower. She heard 2 knocks on the door and then heard the front door being opened. When she opened the bathroom door, she was shocked to see you standing there dressed in full police uniform. You told Miss Watkins that you had a warrant to search the house due to suspected drug dealing. You had some paperwork, but she was not permitted to see it. You confirmed with her that there was no one else in the house. When Miss Watkins asked if she could telephone her husband, you said no and took the phone from her. You told her to remain sitting in the living room. You then went upstairs and located the family safe in the main bedroom. You brought the safe down and asked Miss Watkins for the key. She told you that she didn't know where it was.
The safe contained over £16,000, and that was all Sergeant Cook cared about. It's shocking how he showed no fear of accountability. Went ahead and stole the safe, completely oblivious to how badly he'd ruined his career.
It was estimated to have been about £16,000 in cash in the safe. You told Miss Watkins that you had to take the safe away to get your colleagues to open it. You told her that you could not give her a receipt as she did not know the contents of the safe. You took a note of her mobile number and left at 12:31 hours. Miss Watkins immediately called her husband, Mr. Bailey. He came home, collected the key to the safe, and went to Bridgend Police Station to ask for his safe to be returned. At the police station, he was told that there was no record of police attendance at the address, and the matter was reported as a burglary. Was that evening, you telephoned Miss Watkins and pretended to be PC Roberts from Gwent Police. Miss Watkins asked if you were the same officer from earlier that day. You asked if she wanted a crime reference number and if she had a pen and paper, and then you hung up. Here you telephoned the South Wales Police Anti-Corruption Unit and said that you wanted to hand yourself in as you had done something stupid. You claimed that you had been blackmailed and were in fear. When asked what you had done, you said that you had done a burglary, that you had been tasked to do it by persons that you didn't know but that you feared.
Realizing the situation had spiraled out of control and that the incident was now being treated as a burglary, the sergeant turned himself in, but then made a shocking claim, insisting he'd only done it because he was being blackmailed.
Those persons had requested you to go to an address and remove something, which you did. You said that you had removed a safe with unknown contents and left it on When you were interviewed on the 10th of February following your arrest, you claimed that you were being blackmailed because of your involvement with a female who you named. You said that a Bridgend-based organised crime group may have been responsible. You denied entering the property in Maesteg as a trespasser, claiming that you had been invited in as part of a setup and that you had been given instructions on where to leave the safe. You were interviewed about the first set of offences on the 29th of April this year. This time you said that you were being blackmailed because you had sent sexual pictures of yourself to another man. Others had discovered your occupation and identity and demanded money from you, which you did not pay.
Imagine being this dumb and ruining your entire career and reputation for a few £1,000s. Even worse was the fact that the officer refused to acknowledge his crimes.
On the 7th of March 2024, you pleaded not guilty to the 3 counts then on the indictment. You did not offer a guilty plea to any alternative offences. You asserted generally that you had been acting under duress. It has been submitted on your behalf that you are entitled to the full 1/3 credit for your guilty plea to count 4, as you pleaded guilty to that offence as soon as it was added to the indictment. However, you could have made an unequivocal indication of a guilty plea to this offence before that stage, or given an unequivocal indication that you accepted the facts and would plead guilty to an appropriate offence. You did not do so. Therefore, you are not entitled to full credit. You will be given at least 20% credit for that offence and for the burglary and computer misuse offences. I have considered the sentencing guideline on totality. I will pass a sentence on count 2 that will reflect your overall offending and concurrent sentences for all other offences.
However, after pleading not guilty the first 2 times, Sergeant Cook finally pleaded guilty. The stolen safe, however, was never recovered, as Cook claimed he had left it in a wasteland, following instructions from his so-called blackmailers.
Harm caused, which can include consequential harm, is high, given the dwelling house burglary that resulted and the likelihood of loss of trust in the police. First, punishment and deterrent are always important, because not only must police officers be deterred from misconduct, but the public must see that condign punishment will be visited on police officers who betray the trust reposed in them. Secondly, an incentive, usually but not necessarily money, inevitably increases the seriousness of the offence. It is those principles only that I have taken into account, as the offence and the circumstances of the offence in that authority are very different from those in this case.
Eventually, after listing the entire description of the case that unfolded, Judge Tracy Clark took the disgraced cop to the cleaners and held him fully accountable for his actions.
This will not be taken into account a second time for those offences. For the theft of the key and the attempted burglary, I have borne in mind that you knew that Miss Price was mourning the sudden death of her brother. I have taken into account the effect of the burglary on Mrs. Watkins. Apart from the theft of the key, all your offending is aggravated by the careful planning of the offences, and that the offences were committed for financial gain. In mitigation and reducing the seriousness of your offending, you have no previous convictions. For over 10 years before you committed these offences, you had a positive character and exemplary conduct, even beyond that normally expected of a serving police officer, having received 3 commendations. Stand up, please, Mr. Cook. However, your actions are no reflection on the very many police officers who uphold the high standards that you upheld before January.
Eventually, the judge handed down a sentence ensuring that the corrupt sergeant would spend more than 6 years behind bars.
For the theft of the key, if you had been convicted after a trial, the sentence would have been one of 3 weeks imprisonment. Less the 1/3 discount for your early guilty plea, the sentence is 2 weeks imprisonment. For the attempted burglary, if you had been convicted after a trial, the sentence would have been 2 years, 6 months imprisonment concurrent. Less the 1/3 discount for your early guilty plea, the sentence is 1 year, 8 months imprisonment concurrent. For the burglary, if you had been convicted after a trial, and to reflect your overall offending, the sentence would have been one of 8 years imprisonment concurrent. Less at least 20% discount for your guilty plea, the sentence is 6 years and 4 months imprisonment concurrent. For the computer misuse offence, if you had been convicted after a trial, the sentence would have been 2 years imprisonment concurrent. Less at least 20% discount for your guilty plea, the sentence is 1 year, 8 months imprisonment concurrent. For the offence of corrupt or improper exercise of the powers of a police officer, if you had been convicted after a trial, the sentence would have been 2 years imprisonment concurrent. Less at least 20% discount for your guilty plea, the sentence is 2 years and 4 months imprisonment concurrent. That means that your total sentence is one of 6 years and 4 months.
Well, this brings us to the end of this video. Today, we saw cases where judges took these corrupt and killer cops to the cleaners for abusing their powers. Thankfully, both of these remorseless cops were held accountable and taken to the cleaners. And if you enjoyed these bizarre moments, you'd be stunned to watch these unseen body cam moments which are hard to believe.
You step back. Hold up.
Possession of a short-barreled rifle, false imprisonment, a bunch